pathogens that can also be found at farm level, such as Salmonella or Campylobacter. So this is more than just animal health, but it's a matter of food safety also. And this is especially relevant because the environment of the farms can harbor all these pathogens and this multi-drug resistance at farm level. So in this context, the objective of our study was to study the presence of multi-drug resistant bacteria, enteric pathogens, and their resistance genes to the main antibiotic use in the clinical practice, both within the environment and the animals across pig farms, depending on their health status level. So we sampled a total of 6 farms in Spain. We sampled high health status farms and low health status farms, 3 of each. So the high health status farms are mainly, are the top farms that we have in Spain with the best performance parameters and lowest veterinary cost, and low health status that are mainly characterized by having post-weaning diarrhea in a high number of the piglets and delay in the parameters, performance parameters, and higher veterinary cost. So we took samples of each farms, I was saying. We sampled one farm within each, one house within each farm, and as you can see in the A1 picture, we sampled 10 different pens of each farm. We took both regarding the animal samples. We took fecal samples from the sow of each pen and 3 of her piglets, and regarding the environmental samples, we took wall and slab samples that we pulled into different pools, and additionally 2 slurry pit samples from each farm. And well, we screen in the search for the main, as I was saying, multi-drug resistant bacteria, both phenotypically and their resistant mechanism. So which main bacteria did we search? Well, we studied the most common multi-drug resistance from the main pathogens, as we were saying, like different enterobacteria, Staphylococcus aureus, Enterococcus, and the specific enteric pathogens, Clostridium difficile, Salmonella, Yersinia, and Campylobacter. We used these chromogenic agars for the isolation, and all of them were confirmed by mass spectrophotometry. And we realized a statistical analysis to see if it was really a difference between the origin of the sample and the status of the farm related to the presence or not of this multi-drug resistant bacteria. So what did we actually see? Well, we collect a total of 274 samples from all of the farms. 60 of them belonged to the sows, 180 to the piglets, and 34 were from the environment. We isolate a total of 9 groups of microorganisms. As expected, the main microorganisms isolated were the enterobacteria, which most of them were E. coli and a few of Klebsiella pneumoniae. And say that all the vancomycin-resistant Enterococcus were Enterococcus faecium, and regarding the gram-negative bacilli were Aeromonas or Pseudomonas. And regarding, well, neither Salmonella or Yersinia were isolated from any sample on those farms, and well, when we tried to confirm this phenotypic resistance, we saw that most of the enterobacteria, all of them, were phenotypically and genotypically resistant, but it didn't happen with the other bacteria. So, what did we actually see? Well, here we have a difference between the health status of the farm depending on the resistance observed, and what we saw was that all of them there were a significant statistical difference. Higher multi-drug resistance were observed in high health status farms, contrary to what we expected. And if we address the kind of sample, we can also see that environmental samples have higher multidrug resistance than animal samples. And it's, well, quite curious, because we always address that animals have or present are the main contributors to this antimicrobial resistance, but in fact, almost everything is on the environment. And if we split by the kind of sample that we got, we can also see, well, that the percentage of the resistance have lowered a bit, but we can still see those patterns where we see more resistant bacteria in high health status farms than in low health status farms. So we can conclude, well, that higher antimicrobial rates in high health status farms and in environment samples suggest that the current cleaning and disinfection protocols, which normally are more exhaustive in high health status farms, could be selecting multidrug resistant bacteria in the environment of the farm. And these results also show that we don't have only to focus on animals, but also the environment, because it plays a key role harboring all of these pathogens are the multidrug resistant bacteria, which could be transmitted to the animals and then that in the final product, in the consumers. Therefore, the sector needs more specific, environmentally friendly and safe cleaning and disinfection protocols directed to these pathogenic bacteria or microorganisms to achieve a more safety and sustainable livestock farming. So, well, I would like to thank the Spanish government for funding this project and all of the entities which have made it possible. And, well, thank you so much.
We're open for questions now.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm a vet from the UK. One additional piece of information that might be useful would be to know whether you measured the antimicrobial usage difference between the high health status farms and the low health status farms in terms of defining whether there's a difference in the volume of antimicrobials used across both and how that might impact on the resistant bacteria that you're seeing. Did you look at that?
Yes. Yes, I don't remember like all the data right now, but we know that when we collect all the samples, which were at like the beginning when they were just like born, all the piglets, they didn't have taken any antimicrobials at that moment on those farms.
Other questions? There's one.
Do you know if there was like a big difference in biosecurity protocols between the two types of farms in your sample?
Yeah, well, the truth is that not. I mean, the kind of the sample, the kind of the farms were most the same. All of them are owned by the same companies, and the roles are more or less, they were the same, like in biosecurity terms. We mainly difference these kind of farms, like I was showing in the other picture, by their performance parameters, the presence or not of the main disease on pig production, and like some more parameters.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give Anne a hand. Our next presentation will be by Jessica Lira de Silva from South Dakota State University, nutrition. And her talk is on the effects of dietary zinc sulfate in late gestation and lactation of sows and offspring performance. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for our presentation. So a little bit of background. The genetic improvements in swine production have increased in litter size at birth, and this has just a PigChamp survey brings that increase approximately of 0.20 pigs per liter per year. And with that, USDA brings that the wean litter size in US increased approximately 0.12 pigs per liter per year. This difference between at birth litter size and at weaning can contribute for approximately 4% of increased pre-wean mortality. As everybody knows, pre-wean mortality can be affected for any other factors. One of those is increase of litter size. Said that, zinc has been already used a lot in the nursery phase to improve, show positive effect on, especially on the first 2 weeks, improving gut health of the piglets, and consequently of that, improving piglet survival. On top of that, there is some research in bring some that sows supplemented with high dose of zinc during late gestation have shown positive effects on offsprings, such as an increase in piglet survival. So there is some already zinc. What is the role of zinc on this improving immune support for the sow or for the animal, in fact, making healthier piglets, heavier and healthier piglets. Said that this study, the objective of this study was to evaluate the effect of dietary inclusion of high doses of zinc during late gestation and lactation in combination with a different litter size on sow and piglet performance, with focus on pre-wean mortality. This study was conducted in Swine Education Research Facility at South Dakota State University. This research was conducted from late gestation to weaning. The sows was located in pens where they were taking body weight on day 110 of gestation. We used 2 groups of sows with 43 sows total with average body weight of 252 kilos. They were moved into the farrowing room. We count with the 25 stalls per room, and they were under supervision on 114 days of gestation until they farrow during that period of birth. Sows was taking body weight at day 1 of lactation and at day 1 and at weaning too. The diets was contained on gestation and lactation was 2 diets. The control contained 198 ppm of zinc, and the high concentration of zinc was 653 ppm of zinc. The source of zinc was zinc sulfate. An important point here in this research is we use on day 2 after birth, we foster in 3 different categories considering the number of teats. The first category was 1 piglet less than the teat's capacity. The second was equal number of piglets with the teats, and one more in the third was 1 piglet more than the teat's capacity. Sows and piglet performance was measured through the body weight to calculate average daily gain for both. The sow was average daily feed intake was also measured. Milk output using the formula from Noblet 1989, using average daily gain from the piglet and number of piglets weaned. The litter characteristic was also taken live born, stillborn, and mummies. The analysis was doing using the PRO-mix procedure of SAS. The statistical model contained the fixed effect of dietary treatment, fostering, and the sow group as a block. The significance of difference was reported in p-value below less than 0.05. So we didn't see any effect, the interaction between the treatments of zinc and fostering. So the effects of fostering on offspring performance, as we can see on this table, as the category 1 On piglets, number of piglets on day 2, there is a difference since we classified them on 3 categories. That's why they were heavier on the category 1. They were heavier and they were heavier and more average daily gain was higher too on the piglets on a category 1, which was 1 piglet less than the teat's capacity compared with the additional pig compared with the number of teats. And this due to the fact that the milk production didn't change between those, so the competition increased when you add 1 more piglet on compared with the number of teats. Pre-wean mortality, the fostering, the capacity number 1 was lower compared, and this, we can see a tendency for the starvation is playing again, go back to the milk production was equal, so had less competition, so they have more available milk for the ones they were with on the category number 1. Didn't have any effect for sow performance on dietary of the zinc in late gestation lactation for sow performance. Farrowing performance also didn't see any effect of the zinc on the farrowing performance. No effect for lactation performance either on the treatment of zinc. We saw a tendency for pre-wean mortality with the sows supplemented with high zinc, as we can see here. And then also this is a point that even we didn't see a meaningful here. There is numerically the sows supplemented with high zinc. There were very low numbers impact on pre-wean mortality piglets. So I encourage doing more studies on that. Might be due to the fact that we use only 43 sows. Maybe with more sows we can see more effect on that. Conclusion on that, sows received high zinc supplementation during late gestation and lactation tend to reduce piglet pre-wean mortality. Additional piglet fostered per teat capacity increased mortality and reduced piglet body weight.
Open for questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Job from University of Debrecen in Hungary, but from Kenya. I would just want to know if you could have considered litter uniformity at the time of fostering. Could it have affected your outcome of the results, like small, 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 large, or large, large at the inception of fostering? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. You mean about the size of the piglets, right? I try to do the best, but since I try to keep per treatment, I actually didn't move much the litter. I try to keep where they belong, they stay there. But it's a small number, I would say, could have impact with if it's a bigger number of sows. On our sow side, it's pretty healthy and they looked good, but I agree with you, might be impact, yes, if you foster by size.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon. I am Dr. Joy Vicinal from Greenfeed, Vietnam. I would like to ask, because in feeding the gestating sows for practicality purposes, would you consider increasing also the zinc inclusion as early as in the early gestation? Because for practicality purposes, we cannot just change the specifications of the diet based on each stage. We might change the amount, but if you have one building with only one silo, so different stages in one building, so we need to feed those sows just one diet for all. So what would be your opinion on increasing the zinc oxide as early as the zinc for as early as the early gestation?
Early gestation. So the big thing, I think I would, but in the same point as environmental, zinc has a point that plays a role that on the excretion. So the late gestation, we did it just because it's more crucial for the sow on the late gestation. But environmental would be my point, that not would be done on the early.
If I may just quick follow-up. So for the practicality of application, so what would be your recommendation? To put it on top? Because if you cannot put that in one silo?
Yeah, but also if you're not a high dose, like we use 600 ppm here, would increase, because the recommendation is 50 ppm. I would increase for 100 at least, and it could be on early. But yeah, if you add on by size, but I don't know on a practical if that would be more hands, would need more one person to do that. So I don't know if it's really practical in US.
Last question, back in the corner there.
Just to follow up on his, how about going the other way and just putting it just in lactation? Could you do that, and then what level would you do?
Yeah, that's interesting on lactation, especially because we took very late gestation on the practical side. It was like 2 weeks before they go to farrowing. So lactation is the moment they start farrowing, the inflammation there. I would say the zinc, and we can see the results in other research, the zinc actually show positive effect when there is any disease or any challenge. So I would agree, maybe just lactation, yes.
I think we're going to cut it off here. Thank you very much. Jessica? Our next presentation from Katlyn McClellan from South Dakota State University on evaluating the use of blood hemoglobin concentrations as a potential biomarker for locating at-risk sows near parturition. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So I'll kind of get right into my introduction. The main character of my work today was hemoglobin, and most of this introduction information is probably going to serve as a refresher, but I'm going to go through some key points here briefly. So we know that hemoglobin is a principal component of the red cells in the blood, and it comes with these fundamental components up here that are necessary for its synthesis. For the sake of time, one component that I want to point out is that iron molecule on each of the heme groups. Now, each of those iron molecules has a valence of 2+, which is what allows them to serve as oxygen binding sites for that hemoglobin molecule, giving hemoglobin the primary role in the body, which is to transport oxygen. Now, what happens when a subject is deficient in hemoglobin, this will lead to that decrease in oxygen carrying capacity, which is what we refer to as anemia. Now, there's various causes of anemia, including multiple nutritional deficiencies that can cause anemia, but the most leading cause in mammals is an iron deficiency. Now, when it comes to actually diagnosing anemia in swine, a common method to do this in both veterinary practice and research is done through a method called point-of-care testing. And there's actually a device that has been validated in swine. It's called the HemoQ device, and this is a portable hemoglobin analyzer that only requires one small drop of blood. And typically this is drawn from the ear vein. The device is very quick. It takes less than a minute to analyze that hemoglobin, and due to the location in which we obtain the blood, it's minimally invasive. Now, the threshold that is commonly used currently in swine, regardless of age, is 10 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin in whole blood. Now, currently we know that anemia in sows is common in late gestation and lactation. There was a study done that found about a 50% prevalence of anemia when they screened sows across 11 commercial sow herds. In some longitudinal work that I conducted at South Dakota State University a couple years ago, we found that hemoglobin decreases with advanced parity, and there's a lack of recovery to increasing back to higher hemoglobin after each lactation period. Now, when it comes to implications, this is something we don't know a whole lot about. It's relatively unexplored. However, some work out of Denmark has shown that if a sow enters farrowing in an anemic state, she's going to be likely to have more stillborn incidents. And then we can often compare it to human findings due to the similarities between the sow and the gestating women. And you can see up here, they have seen that there's an increase in labor duration in anemic women, as well as complications associated with that prolonged labor duration. Now, the objective of my study was to screen sows for hemoglobin prior to farrowing, assess its impact on parturition, and to set reference ranges for late gestational sow hemoglobin. For this particular study, we had 101 sows enrolled, and up on the screen I have the distribution of parity. We had a range from parity 0 to parity 3. They were housed in stalls for the first 30 days of gestation, then moved to group housing for those last 80 days of gestation, then moved to farrowing crates around day 110 of gestation. Barn temperature was kept at a set point of 18.9 degrees Celsius, and we did record average daily minimum to maximum temps inside the barn during the experimental period. All females in this study were fed standard gestation and lactation diets that were formulated to meet or exceed the NRC estimated requirements for gestating and lactating gilts. In gestation, they were given around 2.2 kilograms per day, and then pre-farrowing bumped up to 2.7 kilograms per day. In pre-farrowing, once they moved into those sow crates, they were put onto an electronic feeding system, which allowed us to go and estimate pre-farrowing intake. Now, for actual samples here, we collected hemoglobin concentration in each of those sows at day 112 of gestation when they entered farrowing crates, and then again at day 2 postpartum. And we used the same method that I had mentioned earlier on in my introduction. I also recorded sow removals from the point of enrollment, which was that day 112, all the way until the end of their next subsequent reproductive cycle. Now, we had a specific farrowing protocol for obvious reasons for this study because our main objective was to look at farrowing duration. I'm not going to go through this for the sake of time, but I can revisit it at the end if needed. For piglet outcome, we did do lung flotations on the pigs, and then we also on the stillborn pigs, and then we also weighed pigs within 20 hours after birth. Data was analyzed using proc mix of SAS to test the fixed effect of hemoglobin status on farrowing duration using total born as a covariant. Other tested variables included parity, pre-farrowing feed intake, time since last feeding, and barn temperature. And then we also looked at correlations between hemoglobin and farrowing duration as well as stillborn pigs. Now you can see that when we tested at that day 112 time point, we ended up having 53 sows enroll in the anemic category and 48 sows enroll in the non-anemic category. For the sake of time, there's really only a few things I want you to focus on here, and that's highlighted at the bottom is the total born birth weight and total born litter weight. You can see between the two groups there was no significant differences, and they were all numerically very the same between the two groups, which is important to note here because those variables would have been likely to impact farrowing duration, which again was our main objective here. However, there was no difference here. So here up on the screen, towards the left hand of the screen, I have a bar chart which shows the actual minutes of farrowing duration for each of those groups. You can see we had about a 2-fold greater increase in farrowing duration in those anemic sows compared to those non-anemic sows. Again, no difference in total born. Up on the right-hand side of the screen is a scatter plot, and that shows the correlation between sow hemoglobin at that day 112 time point and then farrowing duration. You can see a pretty strong negative correlation for something like farrowing duration, which has so many other things impacting it. So we were pretty happy with that correlation that we see here. Now this is interesting because I did break the categories up into more specific reference ranges as opposed to just using that 10 cutoff. You can see as those sows lower in hemoglobin, their farrowing duration increases. The sows that were able to maintain around a 300-minute farrowing duration, which has in the past been indicated as that threshold we want to maintain, were those sows that fell above 10 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin. Here I just show you this because parity is obviously a factor impacting hemoglobin and our prevalence of anemia, but I did go ahead and break this data up to look at the parity effect here, and we did see the same effect with anemic sows going into the crate and its effect on farrowing duration regardless of parity. Now looking at these other variables tested, you can see that we looked at time since last feeding, as well as pre-farrowing feed intake, and we saw no significant difference here, so we deemed those factors as unlikely to have contributed to those increased farrowing durations, especially a twofold greater increase is what we saw. And then again, same thing with barn temperature. This was barn temperature on their actual individual sow farrowing days. No difference here, and all very numerically the same between the two groups. Now just some anecdotal data here, just out of interest to show you. Like I said, anecdotal, but it's interesting. We had almost 2 times greater removal of sows in the anemic group from those sows that entered farrowing below 10 grams per deciliter and had those long farrowing durations. So in conclusion, the target hemoglobin level in sows should probably be maintained at 10 grams per deciliter to mitigate negative implications. Anemic sows are more prone to prolonged farrowing durations because this is potentially contributing to sow removals and mortality. And hemoglobin can serve as a biomarker to identify those at-risk sows for complications during farrowing and those prolonged labor events, which may help barn staff prioritize time and resources. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time, and I'll take any questions.
Questions?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And I'm curious on the removal, the sow removals, retained pigs, or did you dig any deeper into the causes, some of the variables there?
I didn't have time to include it. I did my best. A lot of this is off speculation because the best way obviously would have been to send those sows to the lab and do necropsies on. So I didn't have that luxury, but this was based on barn staff giving me that information of why that sow was removed. And then, yeah, so up on the screen here, I do have our reasons, which, euthanized off feed and sick, euthanized, we had 1 prolapse. We don't have a whole lot of prolapse prevalence in our research farm, but the 1 prolapse, thankfully, was the anemic sow in my case. But yeah, so I do have the reasons up here on the screen.
Just a follow-up to that, do you expect to do a follow-up study prospectively to look at that parameter and those endpoints?
Yeah, we're actually working on, I just started my PhD and I am currently working on follow-up work in this area. So I'm not leaving it. This was my master's work, but we are doing follow-up work in this area to figure more things out here.
Thank you for the presentation. Quick one. If we know that sows are anemic and we test sows, if you want to look at the application of a tool like this, what can we as nutritionists do to actually now improve the status of the sows before farrowing?
So if you have a prevalence of anemia on your farm, besides screening them and then flagging those sows and maybe paying more attention to those sows and leaving the other sows to let them farrow, because they're probably going to, the ones that aren't anemic, what I found that they're going to be the ones that lay down and have their pigs. We didn't have to sleeve those sows. We didn't use any oxytocin in this study. However, those sows had their pigs with no assistance. If we actually wanted to help the sow and treat anemia, that's going to take knowing what's causing it, which is something we actually don't know right now. So some epidemiology work is in the works, but yeah. I would say screening them and being aware that it's prevalent is probably my best recommendation right now.
Do you want to comment on the high-risk category and what criteria were used for that? And do you see now using hemoglobin as a factor in defining high risk?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hemoglobin as a biomarker right now. It obviously was my master's work, and I'm very passionate about it, but I think it's telling us a lot about
It's indicating, not just farrowing duration, but when you go in the barn and you test these sows, the ones that are low, you can just tell those sows are anemic. They're the at-risk sows in your barn. So I think hemoglobin is very valuable. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it's probably going to get somewhere here soon.
Sorry, I find it a very interesting topic. The variation, if you look at you feeding the sows the same, I assume it's the same levels of iron in the diet, same sources, everything the same. How would you explain the variation in those levels leading up to farrowing in terms of hemoglobin status?
Yeah, so I've done some longitudinal work as well, as I said, and we see that as the gilts, they start out fairly high in hemoglobin, and they just decline and decline and decline. So there's a parity effect on this. By parity 3, what I have found is they are, I guess you can deem them as chronically anemic. They never recover from that third litter, and so at each lactation, they're just lowering and lowering, and they're never able to recover and fully restore their hemoglobin, whether that be iron stores causing that or some other nutritional deficiency or a physiological response to something else. Could be something much deeper. But as to why we might have within a parity sows going in anemic and some not, there's no telling. We've not seen a body weight effect. It's something that we are currently looking at, though.
Okay, let's give a hand for. Also, before we get to the next speaker, I think we should also give a hand to the Minnesota Vikings that destroyed the Houston Texans today. Okay, our next third of 3 from South Dakota State by Audrey Field, who's an undergraduate at South Dakota State. And she will be talking about the impact of extra care in lightweight wean pigs. Audrey.
Good afternoon. My name is Audrey Field, and this is my project, The Impact of Extra Care in Lightweight Wean Pigs. To get things started off with a high-level summary, under the conditions of this study, providing extra care to lightweight wean pigs does not increase the survivability or growth performance. Based on this project, our recommendation to producers receiving a group of high-health wean pigs is to not spend the additional time, labor, and supplies to provide that additional care to a lightweight pen. A little bit of background, it's a very common practice in the swine industry to fill a pen or pens with visually lightweight pigs at weaning time. This allows additional care and attention to be provided to those smaller pigs. It limits competition when starting on feed and getting used to that new water source during this incredibly stressful period of these pigs' lives. And finally, it allows caretakers to provide specific care to one pen without needing to provide care to all the pens. Little research has been performed on starting lightweight pigs. With the limited research conducted, it shows that there's little benefit to gruel feeding pigs, but there's never been studies done to show the extra care along with gruel feeding. Our objective was to evaluate nursery performance between 2 operational practices for pens of lightweight pigs, an extra care and a standard care. Our hypothesis states that there was no difference in survivability and growth when extra care was provided to lightweight pigs. These pigs were sourced from a 10,000 head sow farm in north central South Dakota. It's what in the system we would term as high health, which includes being PRRS wild type and vaccine negative, flu negative, mycoplasma negative, and then overall they just had a low bacterial pathogen presence. They were 25-day-old wean pigs, and then the farm had a 10-week average of a 15-pound pig. So overall, we had old wean pigs that were heavy, and overall they were just very healthy. And then prior to weaning, all pigs received a full dose of PCV2 vaccine. They were weaned into Research Barn 1, which is a 2,400 head wean to finish commercial barn. It has an 84 pen layout with about 28 pigs per pen, which equivalates to 6.83 square feet per pig. My trial was performed in the west room of this barn with 2 pens, and the rest of the barn was used for a different study. These pigs were allocated to treatment by weight. The 56 smallest pigs in the barn were individually weighed and assigned to treatment. This graph right here shows allocation weight in pounds, with the average weight for extra care being 8.84 pounds compared to standard care with 8.85. This is what we would term as a successful allocation. Getting into my treatment details, I had 2 treatments, a standard care and an extra care. The standard care was walked 2 times a day, 8 hours apart for 1 week post-wean to identify sick animals or animals falling behind. My extra care group was walked 4 times a day, 4 hours apart, 1 week post-wean. When I walked the standard care, they were mat-fed both times. When I walked the extra care, they were mat-fed on time 1 and 3, which correlates to 4 a.m. and 12 p.m., and then they were gruel-fed on times 2 and 4, which correlates to 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. The gruel feed consisted of 0.8 pounds of feed, 1 tablespoon of electrolyte powder, and 1 gallon of water mixed together and fed in a red feeder. My standard care was provided a mat for 3 weeks post-wean, compared to my extra care was provided a mat for 5 weeks post-wean. Both groups were administered treatments as needed, and then my extra care was also administered a half a cc of an anti-inflammatory medication via an intermuscular injection at arrival in the wean barn. In addition, my extra care was provided a brooder for 4 weeks post-wean, and the standard care was not provided a brooder. These pigs were intentionally exposed to PRRS due to the other trial being performed in the barn. So 2 days post-wean, all pigs were vaccinated with PRRS, MLV, and myohyopneumonia via an intermuscular injection. Then 2 weeks post-wean, all pigs were exposed to PRRS 144 lineage L1C. The data collected during this trial, we wanted to collect a lot of individual body weights right when those pigs got weaned to see how they started off, to see if that extra care really did make a difference. And then after day 37, we weighed them, we had pen weights from each diet change to feeder to finish. This trial is ongoing, so those weights are still happening. And then mortality was recorded throughout the entire study. Getting into the economic portion of this a little bit, the total cost to provide extra care to a lightweight wean pig was $5.82 per pig. The gruel feeding consisted of 27 cents, with the electrolyte powder being 6 cents, the water being 3 cents, and the feed being 18 cents. The anti-inflammatory was 5 cents per pig, and my biggest portion was labor at $5.50. Breaking that down, they were walked 2 extra times a day, which took half an hour. So a half an hour, 2 extra times a day, 7 days post-wean at $22 an hour gets us to $5.50. Diving into the trial results, this graph shows growth performance. So on the left-hand side, we have average pig weight in pounds and wean day represented as 0 days post-wean. On the top, I have my treatment groups, extra care with 28 pigs per pen, standard care with 28 pigs per pen, and then to the far right, my p-value. As you can see, there's no statistical significance between these 2 group weights. This graph shows the same as the last graph, just in a little different format that's easier to see. So I have weight in pounds on the left-hand side. Along the bottom, I have days post-wean. My extra care is represented in blue, and my standard care is represented in orange. And as you can see, there was no difference in weights between these 2 treatments. This is the survivability. So on the left-hand side, I have mortality to 84 days post-wean as a number. I have mortality to 84 days post-wean as a percentage. Across the top, I have extra care with 28 pigs per pen, standard care with 28 pigs per pen, and then to the far right, my p-value. I had 7 mortalities in my extra care group, which correlated to 25%. I had 9 mortalities in my standard care group, which correlated to 32.1%. While this is a numerical difference, it did not lead to a statistical difference. Some strengths and limitations of this trial. Some strengths was the data was analyzed statistically. There was frequent data collection during the nursery period. Again, we really wanted to see how these pigs started off in the barn and if that extra care really did make a difference. And then we had a high health sow farm with an old wean age. We had big, healthy pigs coming into this barn. Some limitations was sample size based off of barn and pig availability, 1 pen per treatment group, and then while it was a strength, it was also a limitation to have a high health sow farm with an old wean age, because we weren't able to evaluate what a lower wean age or a low health sow farm would look like. Moving back to the high-level summary, under the conditions of this study, providing extra care to lightweight wean pigs does not increase the survivability or growth performance. Based on this project, our recommendation to producers receiving a group of high-health wean pigs is to not spend the additional time, labor, and supplies to provide that additional care to a lightweight pen. I just would like to say thank you to Pipestone Research for funding this trial and helping me with it. And are there any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Lightweight pigs at weaning could have probably been light also at the start of the lactation. Could there be a practical application that the care for the lightweight pigs should actually start earlier than picking them at the onset of weaning? Thank you.
I think that's a really good point. Just what kind of pigs are we getting into the wean barns? Making sure that they are bigger, older pigs might help us in that area.
It's interesting research. Thanks for the paper. Do you think there might have been, this was performed in a research barn, and sometimes you get different results out of research than you would out of a standard barn? Just curious your thoughts.
So the barn that this was performed in looks very, very similar to what a commercial barn would look like. So while there is showers in and out, everything else is very similar to what you would see in a commercial farm.
Really good presentation, thank you. Just a quick question regarding your standard group. In your experience, how standard is your standard group across the industry in the field?
I think providing a mat, so they weren't provided a brooder because it was summertime, and so that was industry standard. And then providing the mat for 3 weeks post-wean, I would say is pretty standard. And then I would say caretakers walk the pens to mat feed once when they get there and once right before they leave. So we tried to mimic it as best as we could.
Other questions? There's one.
Thank you. What impact do you think the PRRS challenge had on this?
So I think that the PRRS challenge showed like a real life example of what could happen, but it was interesting to me that even with this exemplified challenge for them, the extra care didn't do any better. So I think that was an interesting portion of it, that even under those high stress environment, the extra care didn't do better than the standard care did.
Was that extra care that you decided, that laundry list of extra care, was that decided based on scientific evidence to provide benefit under stress like a PRRS challenge?
No, we determined the extra care protocol just through, we wanted to stir the animals more so they would get up for feed more, and the grueling is a pretty standard thing in the industry as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Anna Paula Malaji from the Federal de Rio Grande do Sul University, faculty member, and she will be talking on sow ability to wean one surplus pig relative to the teat number and lactation feed intake according to milk production. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to be here to show some data. Actually, this data belongs to my PhD student here, Gabriela Zanin. She did this trial with the help of the other undergrad students. So just to make short the context, let's move on to the introduction. We have seen this huge growth on total born and born alive. So we have some kind of discussion yesterday in the prevent, and all this data was discussed. So in the last 15 years here in Brazil and also here, we are observing this huge impact on live piglets. However, when we see like the number of the functional teats, the number doesn't grow as should be. So we are having some limitations like the functional teats in the fairing room. So for the fairing room staff, they are always concerned about how many functional teats are really available during this fairing pool. So some farms in Brazil are performing these forming litters with surplus piglets, sometimes one or maybe 3, 4 surplus piglets relative to the number of functional teats. And they do that mainly for 2 reasons. When the born alive overcome the number of functional teats available in the fairing room, or when the use of nursing sows has some limitation in a batch fairing system. So some farms are doing that, and we have no, I think we have no data enough to recommend this so far. So for the last 4 years, we are trying to run some trials to identify some opportunities and some limitations on this handling. So with these 4 grad students here, we performed 6 trials under field conditions. We try to determine some impact on the piglets, like performance and lesions, occurrence of lesions in piglets, and also with the sows, the impact on the sows, and here to identify the sow ability, some traits that sow could present, because some sows were able to wean the surplus piglet. Like, depending on the trial, it ranged from the 17 to 35%. Some example here, like we did in Rodrigo trials, we formed litter with the same number of piglets, 1 piglet extra, and 2 additional piglets. So as you can see here, there's the number of the piglets that was lost during the lactation, and 0 was the females that didn't lose any piglets. So we have here some sows that were able to wean the surplus piglet, and we're trying now to get all this information to identify some sow traits that could tell us something about it. So in last year, Gabriela showed some data in IPVS in Germany with this data, like parity order, young sows mainly, and high milk production at early lactation were the main factors associated with the sow ability to wean the extra piglets. So in this trial that I'm going to show you, we run in a commercial farm with 2,000 sows. In Santa Catarina State, we used 198 sows, ranging from P2 until P5, with good body condition. And 24 hours later, after 24 hours after fairing, she put one sow per piglet relative to the number of teats. She also recorded the feed intake manually, and she recorded every 5 days until weaning. And after that, we classified the sows based on the milk production estimate. So we used the median, 10.2. So we had low milk sows and high milk sows. And we analyzed the data with SAS. We consider the sow as the experiment unity, and we used mixed procedure. So for the results, we didn't see any difference for the parity order, the caliper score, and body condition score at the beginning of the trial, and they have similar number of teats as well. As you can see here, we had similar litter size at the beginning, but on day 20, they have 1.1 more piglets in high milk sows, and also with heavier piglets, 1 kilogram heavier than the low milk production sow. For the total feed intake, we also see higher feed intake for the high milk production sows compared to the low milk sows. And mainly during this phase, at the early lactation period, day 1 until day 5, so they presented faster growth on feed intake. And when you see the data that I'm trying to explain, the ability of sows to wean the extra piglet, as you can see here, the high milk production sows compared to the low milk production sows, and here is those sows that didn't lose any piglets, so more successful ability on sows that were showing better milk production. So for practical considerations, as we observed, high milk production sows had 1.1 more weaned and 1 kilogram heavier piglets. The main characteristics that we found here in this trial was the feed intake, mainly at early lactation, so stimulating this feed intake ad libitum as soon as possible could be something that we can work on that. And handling and selection sows with high milk production could ensure more ability to wean, even if we don't use the extra piglets like these surplus piglet litters. So this kind of information gives some insights about piglet survivability. So I would like to thank the companies that support the trial and also our funding resource and all the partnership we have with scholarship, funding, acquisition, and also the university partners. So with that, I thank for your attention, and I'm open for the questions.
Questions?
In a very practical approach, how would we tell technicians, how can they identify those high milk production sows when they come from gestation? Because right now, usually I think today the standard is to look at their histories and to count the teat. But I noticed that teat count doesn't really matter. in terms of milk production. So what would be some practical?
Yes. So far, we got some other traits during gestation that we are working on that. So we scanned the mammary udder. We measured the teats. There is no difference between the size of the teats. We couldn't see any difference. What we saw was the higher growth during lactation, because they're more productive. But at early lactation is hard to say that. But I think mainly stimulate feed intake as soon as possible and identify sick animals as like day one care. But it's hard to identify so far as we have the data. Yeah, I couldn't say any other traits like, I don't know.
Question
I
back
didn't
there.
answer.
Yep.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. I am Ariel Peregrino of Dunbred, Southeast Asia. I would like to help her about how to answer that, how to measure the, how to predict what would be the high lactation, high milk yielding sows. Usually, our Dunbred standard is to measure also the P2 back fat before farrowing. So those sows that had a higher back fat would mean correlated to the higher milk yield, and also the management on the day zero means we need to feed these sows higher feed or more feed than we do to the other when we use other genetics.
Do you mean
P2 back fat is very important before farrowing.
Okay. Do you mean at late gestation?
Yes, we measure the back fat before they farrow.
Oh, see. Yeah, they have pretty much similar body condition. We just caliper, and we got some sows that I didn't show here, but we have a subsample that we did weigh the sows. But yeah, it's just a subsample, and I cannot infer something like that. But for the feed intake during late gestation, they are pretty much similar. Actually, this data here is the only experiment that we did with Dunbred sows. There are the 5 trials we did with PIC sows. And they are similar on the output, the results, but not similar in the numbers, but they're similar in the traits, you know.
Thank you for a very nice presentation. Your first graph is what intrigues me the most. You show the relationship over time of total number born and number born alive, and you show what appears to be stillborns potentially shrinking over time when I would expect that to increase over time as it increases. So was that a change to 24-hour care, or do you have any insights as to what happened there, as it appears over time that stillborns have actually shrunk as litter size increased?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We got some more, I think we didn't increase labor in Brazil, but I think we increased more farrowing care and day one care. I think could be related, but actually, yeah, because the born alive growth faster than the total born in those slides, but I think it's more concern about the Fuertes and not only the number of staff, but back down there we have more people in the farrowing room compared here, as I saw last week.
We have one more question.
I don't know if I missed, but did you talk about the parity, and if they were the ones that you noticed support, they were older parities or early, and if it was older, if you think the parity ones, they are the ones that you need to make sure you loaded those parity ones with a number of piglets more, or exactly of number of teats to be function.
In this particular trial, we didn't use P1. We just used P2 until P7. We did one trial with only primiparous sows, with PIC sows. And we loaded, because in Brazil, we usually load the primiparous. Okay, so we do, if they have 15 functional teats, we put 15 piglets. But in that trial, with primiparous sows, we put 2 extra piglets. And the ability to win the surplus piglet was pretty much the same. But when we gather all the trials, with the 6 trials, we see more ability for the young parities, like P1 until P4 at most. They have more success to win the extra piglet.
Thank you, Anna. Let's give her a hand. Our next speaker is from the University of Minnesota, University of Missouri. That was an intentional comment. Swine specialist, Magdiel Lopez Serrano, University of Missouri. Understanding the background of foreign labor in the swine industry in Missouri and Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me well? Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to present. This is a project that is a multi-college or university project and is funded by the National Pork Board. So thank you. So I'd like to clarify these, and I always try to okay. Thank you. So I will always try to relate my project with a piglet, how the piglet grows, and I will consider this project just being weaned right now, but no scoured so far. Okay, I want to clarify that. So, so this is preliminary report results. I did this because when the cutoff deadline was issued by the Leman Conference, I just had a few surveys done, mainly in Missouri and Illinois. So as we know, swine farms are understaffed, and we suffer from a high turnover rate. And one of the reasons is because the rural population is declining, and it's hard to find local employees. Efforts seems to be unfruitful and not working, even if the companies start higher salaries and even offering some incentive programs. And of course, farmers rely on foreign labor to meet their demands. So my previous experience, I managed a few farms in North Carolina, and it was really hard to find local employees. If we wouldn't have TN visa workers coming to our farms, I don't know what would happen with our farms. So that was a very critical point. So just to give you a little bit of what is this TN visa workers program, it was signed, the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA was signed in 1992, and this opened up the opportunity for some professionals from Canada and Mexico that they have a bachelor's degree to come to work in the US or any other country in Mexico or Canada. Of course, Canada has a lot of problems also with labor. So just to give you an idea, just in the livestock sector in 2022, about 33,000 TN visas were approved. And it was a 35% increase compared to 21. And of course, we know that TN visa workers, especially of course from Mexico, have been very important to support the shortage of labor. So they know we know that they are required to hold a bachelor's degree to apply for this type of visa, and they are highly trained, and also they bring a lot of experience to our systems. Of course, they have English barriers. They don't normally speak English, but also on their counterparts, their coworkers or even the management team do not speak Spanish. So in some farms, we know that their TN labor is around or more than 50%. So that's why we wanted to go forward with this research. One of the reasons, one of the first objective is basically to understand their background. Why they are here, what they can bring to our industry. In that way, we can tell to the HR or the top management team, hey, these individuals have these skills and they want to move within our systems, right? So what we did is we surveyed in Spanish 18 employees in Missouri and 12 employees in Illinois from 4 swine systems. It was a 35 question survey, and I'm just showing some results because of time constraints. We asked general information from the farm, of course, demographics, cultural, professional, and academic backgrounds, professional and personal goals, training opportunities, and improvements to the work conditions, and also factors to drive their retention. So for the first objective, I'd like to highlight some results. And this is only, like I said, preliminary reports, basically just frequency, tables of frequency. And we know that these employees hold, 10% of them hold even a master's degree. And then they major normally in agronomy. Most of them, they would like to apply for a promotion. And it was shocking to me because I manage several TN employees, and even if we speak the same language, they never will tell me that they want to apply for a promotion. I thought they were happy with their position, but apparently they want to move on. 73% of these employees were aware of promotion opportunities within their own system. And they would like to apply for different positions, from technical trainer, manager, trainee, team lead, and even some other like auditor position, farm manager, production manager, and also they would like to try to be trained on maintenance position as well. So for the second objective is basically, the second is to determine how satisfied they are. And I will say that 86% of them are satisfied or somehow satisfied. 10% of them, they are neither satisfied or unsatisfied, and only 3% of them are very unsatisfied. Factors they are for driving their satisfaction include the relationship between their supervisors, teamwork, employee benefits, and work environment. And the benefit they would like to get are 40% production bonus, 20% retirement plan, 20% of them they would like to attend to conferences, 10% would like to get some health insurance, and for the individual career objectives, 97% are striving to save some money, 86% they would like to secure a more permanent immigration status, and 30% of them would like to reunite with their families in the US. So in terms of English literacy, they say that 60% of them had a basic level of English, 33% an intermediate, and only 7% of them, they self-assessed on having an advanced level of English. And when we ask them, what is the SOP ability in their own language, in Spanish, 33% do not receive any training materials in Spanish, and 70% most of the time, 27% most of the time, and 40% all the time. So conclusion, the trade NAFTA visa worker is a highly educated population, interested in promotion and primarily technical and leadership roles. Workers are really interested in advancement on their own career and show some ambition within the workforce. Many seek some improvement, any benefit like bonuses or retirement plans and training. And English literacy remains kind of a challenge for them. And I think this opens up the opportunity for the ones that work in the industry, but also in the academia and extension to close this gap and provide some training material for them. So future directions, at the end, we will have around 200 employees surveyed. And these are the states that we are working on. And of course, we want to have more comprehensive data analysis. And the good thing is like we have a rural sociologist that will help us to draw the appropriate conclusions on the social data. And of course, we will do a publication at the end of the project. So with that, this is the team that we are working, and thanks to the National Food Board for funding this research. And with that, I hope I didn't put you to sleep.
Open for questions.
Now I'm from Canada, and sometimes we kind of steal your workers after they get the training in the States. And with most of them, I talk on a personal level. I go in the farms, and we just, sometimes have a 5 minutes personal conversation and ask them why they leave, because I myself started in USA. And they say because of the, like you said, 86% of them want a more permanent solution. And TN visa is not a double intent. So what is what would be next on the employers' play to help them in that regard?
Well, the problem is that the TN visa, in my understanding, do not bring any professional to a path to a permanent residency. So the only way is to transition that employee to a H-1B visa, which is a work visa, and those are really hard to get. The government is not giving those. Those are mainly for professionals that they work, on the IT level or things, even though that we know that we need professionals in the swine industry that they can hold that kind of visa. So that's the major problem, from the employer standpoint, that is really hard to transition them from TN visa to H-1B visa.
So how long are they allowed to extend that TN visa?
The TN visa, I know that there are people that is being here already for 10 years. So it's, in my understanding, is you can extend it as much as you want. But the program is still very kind of new to determine that at some point the government will say you cannot renew more. So that's the main issue there.
Thank you.
Do you expect that employers will develop a farm-specific plan as a result of some of your results for the employees on that farm?
I think that with the employers, with the large employees, I'm very, very optimistic that they are eager to hear the results and do some corrections to what they think that they can help these TN visa workers as well to be here, to be retained, and to be developed as well.
Okay, let's give him a hand. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we can have a logical switch now to viruses, but we will do so. Our next speaker from Iowa State, graduate student
Thank you.
in preventive medicine program, Thin Tran Farm Tian. I'm sure I butchered that, sorry.
You're good.
It will talk on the evaluation of gaseous ozone for decontaminating PRRS and PED on non-porous surfaces in truck cabins. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thanh. I'm from Vietnam, and I'm doing my master and PhD degree in Iowa State University with the Fuertes team. And first of all, I would like to thank to the Leman committee this year that selected our study for this oral presentation. And I would like to thank to my professor, Dr. Derek Holcomb, that support me a lot for this project, evaluation of gaseous ozone for surface decontamination of PRRS and PED virus from rubber surface that we found in the truck cabins. There are 4 parts in my study, and let's jump right in the first one, the introduction. As we all know, PRRS and PED have a huge economic impact to our swine industry. And several studies also share that there always a risk of spreading this virus from the truck cabins. Therefore, we believe that there's always a need for the truck cabin decontamination. And speaking of air and surface decontamination, we have the ozone technologies, which is known as with its ability to kill the pathogens such as the virus through the oxidation, and also its ability to reach all over the place inside the enclosed space. Therefore, the objective of our study that we want to see if we put the ozone machine inside the truck cabins, how is it going to work with the PRRS or PED contaminated rubber coupons. With that, we designed a factorial study with 3 different factors. We work with 2 different viruses, 3 different time levels, half hour, 1 hour, and 2 hours. With ozone treatments, we have 2 different ozone machines, 30 gram per hour, 38 gram per hour, and then we create another set of ozone treatment that combine 2 available machines that we have to create 68 gram per hour. Talk about the process that we do. We conduct this project. First up, we contaminated the virus onto the rubber surface. We work inside a biosafety cabinet and let them dry inside that for 2 hours. And after that, we expose them inside the truck cabins, equipped with a fan to support for the air circulation. And we also have the data loggers to measure for the ozone concentration and also the temperature and humidity every minute. After that, we do the virus recovery. Basically, this step we aim to collect the remaining virus particles and save it for titration later. The process that we do the titration, that we aim to see that from the remaining virus particle that we have, how many of them still have the ability to infect the cells. And we use SAS and Excel to run the analysis. We use the linear mixed regression model, and I know about to compare all over the treatments to see the difference. And now let's jump to the main part, the results, which is the interesting one. So I would like to show here that on the x-axis, we have the positive control here, and also other 3 different ozone treatments at 3 different time levels below here. And on the y-axis, we have the log 10 scale. So for example, log 10 of 2, it means we have 100 of copies. Log 10 of 3, we have 1,000 of copies. So let's interpret the first graph with the PRRS results. So we see here, compared to the positive control here, other groups still, it looks like a straight line in here. Only one group that shows statistically significant difference with the middle level of ozone treatment, 38 gram per hour, that we run at the middle level of 1 hour. The other one for PED in here, in contrast, that we see a variable in the results. We see in the ozone treatment with 30 gram per hour, we see the trend in here that if we increase the time of exposure, we see the downtrend in here. However, we not see the same trend like this in other ozone treatments. And when we see at the result of the statistic, we have 3 ozone treatments that have statistically significant difference. 2 of them came from the ozone 30 gram per hour that we run with 1 and 2 hours. Another one that came from the ozone with the middle level, 38 gram per hour that we run with 2 hours. So until this point, I would like to summarize the results that we didn't see a clear trend that if we increase the capacity of the ozone machines or we increase the time of exposure, it will give more effective. We didn't see that trend. And despite having statistically significant difference in the result, none of the treatment achieved more than 2 log reduction, which is equivalent to 99% of virus reduction. And come back to the data that we have from the data loggers, we plot here that all of the treatment when we run ozone machines separately. And we see here that for the same ozone machines, every time we run it for the first 30 minutes, the curve is not the same for both ozone machines that we have. And we calculate the standard deviation to show the variation of that. So for the ozone machine, 38 gram per hour, the standard deviation of that up to 4.7 ppm and 5.4 for the other one, the 38 gram per hour machine, ozone machine. And with other factors such as the temperature and humidity that we have in our experimental trials, we see that we have the moderate positive correlation with between the ozone concentration and temperature. It means that when we have the high temperature, we have the high ozone concentration as well. What about ozone concentration versus humidity? In contrast, it have a moderate negative correlation. It means that when we have the low humidity, which is the dry air, we have high concentration of ozone when we run inside the truck cabins. Also, other studies that have similar results with us. And overall, when we compare our study with other studies, we see that some of the studies have the same results as us. For example, one study in 2015 from Dr. Gould, that he worked with the ozone gas with a very high concentration of ozone up to 140 ppm. However, the results were ineffective. Another study from Huxon in 2009, in this case that he or she that they did manipulated the humidity, that after they wait for the ozone reach a peak, they give a burst of water to maintain the humidity more than 50%. So in that case, they see that there's some effective. And I guess that maybe some of you know the information that 5 ppm of ozone concentration can kill the ASF virus. But in this case, the ozone, they use not the ozone in the gas form, but they work with the ozone in the water. To explain the relationship between the ozone and humidity, I would like to share here 2 studies in 2020 that they explain with the presence of high humidity, it makes the pathogen such as the virus is more vulnerable to the ozone. And also they have the chemical effects that the water can react with the ozone to create more highly reactive radical species, which can kill the virus also. So back to the question, the objective of this study, that is gaseous ozone ready to apply to the soy field. It's kind of difficult to answer this question, but with the setup of our study, we saw that the ozone gas have variable results, and basically it's because of the correlation between the ozone and also the environmental factors such as the temperature and humidity, as I shared in previous slides. And after working with ozone, I also have some practical considerations. I would like to share that because ozone is really toxicity. So make sure that when we work with ozone, put it inside the enclosed space to avoid it leak out to the environment, because you can find this information from CDC that if the ozone concentration exceeds more than 0.1 ppm and over 8 hours, it kind of considered toxic to the human. And the ventilation is needed to support for the ozone even distribution inside that enclosed space. And when you work with ozone machines, also please make sure that you have the ozone data logger to measure the ozone concentration to see that if the ozone machines that you have, it work as your expectation or not. the last one, that because ozone can cause some damage to some materials inside, for example, the natural rubber. So please make sure that after you run the ozone, we kind of need to look at the material to see that if there is any structural change or damage or not. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I would like to send a big thank to Dr. Holcomb, Dr. JQ, and the FieldWB team that helped me a lot in this study. And I have the poster section today and tomorrow. If there are some questions that I couldn't address, you can meet me in the poster section. So thank you a lot.
Nice job. Open for questions.
Just a quick question. I wonder, why did you decide to analyze the data as categories of data, right? You have times and you're analyzing with ANOVA in separate times instead of making it a continuous, right? And you could make those by time as exposure rate, right? And then make that your x-axis, and then your y could be virus concentration.
Because in here, I put the time that as a combination for each different ozone treatment. So in that case, actually in this one, if I separate, I will have 12 treatments, like ozone 30 gram per hour with half hour, 1 hour, and 2 hours.
You can have those by time.
But I work with different ozone treatments.
The concentration by the time exposure.
Oh, one thing I need to share that because for each ozone machine, every time we run, the concentration is produced is not consistent. So in that case, to make the plot with simply of time and the log of reduction is not. Okay, thank you.
Can talk later at the poster.
Yes.
So, because you have this slide shown, did you use any negative control or any other treatment that known to cause a greater reduction?
Actually, yes, I have the negative control along with the positive control. And because the negative control, after we run, it showed the negative results and kind of to save the space in here. So I didn't put the negative control.
What was your negative control?
So the negative control that I put inside, instead of contaminating the rubber surface with the virus broth, I just put the MEM solution without any virus, and we put inside the truck cabins follow the time. That we didn't put any ozone machines.
And what was the positive control then?
For the positive control,
no ozone.
Yes, no ozone. That only with the virus broth only.
Did you use any other treatment that would reduce the virus, known to reduce the virus under those circumstances?
Yes, I have the treatment that reduces the virus. However, like when we interpret the results, even though they have the statistically significant difference, but then in practical, the reduction of that less than 99%. So it's not like applicable in the field.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Mariana Meneguzzi from University of Minnesota, PhD graduate student under Monsi and Noel Noyes. She will be talking today about detection of multiple porcine viruses using targeted enrichment in real-time long-read sequencing from oral fluid field samples through TELS virus workflow. Mariano, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Montor. Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here presenting, sharing some results of my PhD project. And as was said, my name is Mariana. I am a PhD student here at University. And my PhD project consists in the development and application of a method, a workflow called TS virus. Here, got it. So just to put in context, we have several ideas in mind for the way we're gonna use TS virus workflow. One of them is to improve the way we study virus co-infections. So when you look at virus and virus co-infections in the literature, it seems that is widely reviewed, and also since the co-infections are important to improve, aggravate the clinical outcomes, so to increase clinical signs. However, there are some key gaps that we need to consider. The first one, there are very few large epidemiological studies in commercial livestock. Most of the studies only include 2 to 3 viruses, and most of those viruses that we are studying in the co-infection studies, they are viruses that we already know the clinical and economic importance, and virus variants are not typically characterized. So the main reason for this gap is methodological. We have a lack on this, on how to study co-infection, so how we actually are able to sequence and study multiple viruses from field samples. And then this is mainly because when we work with field or clinical samples, we're gonna encounter very small proportions of viral nucleic acid compared to greater proportions of all the other things that we have in the sample. And this makes it a little bit harder to actually get a lot of virus from the sample. And what we currently do to isolate the virus of interest is to do in vitro virus culture prior to sequence or PCR amplicon sequencing. We do use those methodologies, and they have advantages, but they also have some pitfalls, which are it can alter the virus population structure. We may not be able to get the whole genome. We may not be getting all the genomic diversity in the sample. And if you want to study several viruses, we need to do separate workflows, and this will consequently lead to multi-day turnaround times. So this came, that's why you had the idea of to try to overcome some of the limitations. We had the idea to put it together a method called probe capture enrichment method, and follow this method by a long read sequencing. So instead of short reads, we are using long read sequencing. And that's how we create the TS virus workflow, which stands for target, enrich, long read sequencing of virus. And the whole goal, the idea is to be able to generate and reconstruct the whole genome, viral genome sequence. So I broke down the workflow in 4 main steps, but I will not go through, because of the time, to all of them in detail. I will focus mostly on step 2 and step 4. So, but before we go to step 2, so for step 2, the main idea is to have the baits or the probes, so which is step 1. You design the probes that you wanna to target the virus for, the virus that you have interest. And then after the probe is designed, you include the probes in the samples, and then the probes are able to target the viral nucleic acid that they are designed for. You're gonna have those probes gonna hybridize to the nucleic virus of nucleic acid from the virus. We're gonna be able to do some washes and then amplification. The whole idea is to get more of the nucleic acid from the virus and less of all the other things that we have in the sample. So after that, we do step 3, which is the sequencing. And as I said, we do long read sequencing. So we use Oxford nanopore technology. And then the bioinformatics, we have the reads. So it generates reads. When we generate reads, we align the reads to a host genome. So in our case, we use a swine host genome. And when the reads align to the host genome, we call host reads. When they align to the on-target reads, when that align to the reference, viral reference database we call on-target reads. We also have data on coverage, so horizontal and vertical coverage. So we have horizontal coverage, how many reads we have in the horizontal, and in vertical, how many reads we get per each position. So now that you know the workflow, how it works, the first goal was to assess the efficacy of the TSC virus. We did a head-to-head comparison of on-target versus TSC virus libraries of each sample. To do that, we used nasal swabs. So we had a total of 5 samples. We knew the stats by qPCR for those samples for influenza. So 3 samples were PCR positive for influenza, and 2 samples were qPCR negative for influenza. And we run the same samples using the TSC virus libraries, and the same samples without submit the samples to the TSC virus. We got very high proportions of on-target reads for influenza when the samples were submitted to the TSC virus compared to samples that were not submitted. And we did not see any enrichment for the qPCR negative samples, influenza qPCR negative samples. We also look at coverage profiles for the gene, for the main genes HA and NA, M1 and M2 for those samples. And so the y-axis is the number of aligned reads, so is the vertical coverage, and the x-axis is the position of the genome, so we're gonna see the horizontal coverage here. The red line is the samples that were submitted to TSC virus, and the blue line is the samples that were not submitted. So we can see that by the red line, we had a higher horizontal and vertical coverage for those samples compared to the on-target libraries. So our next other goal was to see, okay, so how the TSC virus work with complex sample types. And to do that, we work with oral fluid samples. So we submit to the TSC virus workflow a total of 144 oral fluid samples that was previous collect and from a study conducted by Dr. Jose Angulo. And what we found was a mean virus richness. So virus richness, I consider here the number of unique viruses I found in each sample, a total of 21. And we also detect more than 95% of the samples, porcine Astrovirus 2 and 4, porcine Bocavirus, porcine Papillovirus 1. So besides those viruses that we are still is not very well characterized yet, we also found detect some viruses that we already know the economic and clinical importance for the swine industry, such as PD, influenza, and PRRS, with a good coverage, horizontal and vertical coverage as well. So as conclusion, we are able to detect multiple co-circulating viruses from complex samples, such as oral fluids. We had an increase of on-target sequencing rate for these samples, and this will allow us to later on do genomic analysis and variant calling for multiple viruses at once. And the workflow is relatively fast. It takes 48 hours from raw sample to the results. So for the next step, we are continue to analyze the oral fluid sample. So we have a metadata with some variables such as mortality and clinical signs that we wanted to include and compare with the data that was generated by TSC virus workflow. And also we are working on validate more virus and sample types, and also continue to optimize the workflow, not only the wet lab, but also the bioinformatic part. With that, I'd like to thank you the funding, the collaborators, especially Dr. Christina and Jonathan Bravo from University of Florida. Dr. Christina is a professor, and Jonathan Bravo is a PhD student computer scientist who help us and collaborate with us with the bioinformatic part, and Noel's lab members and Tohamel lab members. Yeah, Thank you, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you. We have time for maybe 1, 2 questions. I have one for you. You showed the slide of the good, but you didn't show us the bad or the ugly.
Yeah.
Is there any bad or ugly with this method?
Yeah, always. we are never perfect, I guess, right? So yeah, you're right. I showed the good because I think I don't have time to actually go to the challenge and the opportunities, because we had challenge but opportunities as well. So some of the challenges right now are, for this project specifically, for example, I use R9 chemistry for nanopore, and right now they already have R10, so we have for it specifically. But overall, we have some challenge regarding now the variant calling. So the methods, bioinformatic methods right now for variant calling, they are still in process of development, so we're still working on that to get to the end of our goal. So some of the are the challenges, but we also have a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Perfect. There's one question in the back, and then we'll move on.
Thanks for your work, very interesting. Do you have a chance to look at the age of the oral fluids or the time where they were collected, or what are your thoughts on maternal-derived immunity and the role that it could play? Find.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for the oral fluid samples, we are from growing finisher pigs, and we had the time that we choose the time that we detect a higher prevalence of PRRS, and then we randomly select these 144 samples from this after subsetting the time that we had. But it's grower and finisher pigs.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker, McClellan, is also from the University of Minnesota, a postdoctoral researcher, and will be talking to us today about experimental evidence of immune-driven evolution of PRRS2. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Today I would like to present this one. I would change the title a little bit from immune-driven to vaccine-driven, because we don't have like the immune data yet. So first, I would like to acknowledge our working group and SFEAD working group, including University of Minnesota, College of Veterinary Medicine, and Rosalind Institute from University of Edinburgh, especially our team from like Van der Waals, Schroeder's, and Sheeran's laboratories. First, I would like to talk about the background of this study. There are two major topics about the rationale behind our study. The first one, population immunity against PRRS virus, as well as PRRS2 variant emergence. The first plot here, this is Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project data showing the proportion of each PRRS status of sow herds. So this data represent over 50% of sow herds across the US. And you can see that the yellow one, they are the status 2 or the positive stable with vaccination. So we can say that at least 25% they vaccinate their pigs. And other than that, the pink one, they are like the status 2, and they do like the few virus exposure, and the status 1, the red one, so for sure they are the negative, the positive one, and they exposed to PRRS, and many of them may use vaccines. So we can say that about at least 50% of sow herds have some immunity against PRRS. In the meantime, when we look at the variant emergence, this is based on our current study, there are about 4 major new variants emerge every year among 26 variants per year, and some of them grew really fast, like over 200% within a year. For example, like the 1C.5 or L1C144 variant. So in conclusion, despite large immunized population of pig, new variants keep emerging. I mean, like new variants of PRRS, and variant is like the genetically similar group of viruses. So that brought us to this question: does vaccine drive PRRS evolution? So the concept is, so virus, let's say PRRS infecting one pig is not just like a similar PRRS, or some of them may be like genetically distinct, just a bit to the main population. So let's say you know that like the vaccine we use in the field for PRRS, they just like provide just partial immunity, not like completely protect pig from PRRS. So some of them, like I mean, some viruses may survive and be a founder of the next population. So we would say that this is like we just introduce like the bottleneck to the virus population, and that create like the immune pressure. And it seems like virus can escape like this kind of immunity, but there is no study like in the control experiment that show this kind of like hypothesis. So we hypothesized that partial immunity from PRRS to vaccine would create selection pressure, driving more rapid genetic change. In order to prove this one, we designed the study starting from weaning. So after pigs weaned, we divided them into 3 groups. The first one, non-immunized, and other 2, we vaccinated them with the common commercial vaccine we call vaccine A and B. So after 64 days, at 3 months old, we challenged all of them with the same PRRS virus. And then we collect blood samples every 3 days for whole genome sequencing. At the end point, 14 days post-inoculation, we not only did the whole genome sequencing, but also collect the samples to use as the next batch inoculum. So we used 7 pigs per batch per treatment. If you remember, we have like 3 treatment groups, the green one, non-immunized, and other 2, they are vaccinated groups. So for the first batch, we inoculated all of them with the same PRRS virus. And then we have like 6 batches of the infection chain. The next batch, after batch 1, we use the inoculum from like the end point of the previous batch. After that point, we chose 2 samples with the lowest CT value selected per animal to do whole genome sequencing. And we got 184 successful whole genome sequences, which is about 12 samples per batch per treatment. After that, we do phylogenetic tree using IQ tree for each treatment. Also compare the genetic distance between treatments and between between batches. So for the key findings, the first one, we conclude that PRRS2 evolved more in vaccinated groups. Why we say that? Because this is the phylogenetic tree showing the relationship between all the samples we chose. And the red tips, they are like the last batch samples, and the blue one, they are the first batch sample. And if you see like the longer horizontal line or the branch of the tree, that is the more genetic distance to each other. So you can see that for the non-immunized group, they are like a flat line. There is no horizontal branch at all, like just only some of them. Compared to the vaccine A and B groups, they have like the progressively branching away from like the founding population, the blue one. The red one just like form the ladder-like form of the tree. And to confirm that, we also measure the mean genetic distance for each treatment group. And within the last batch, we found that there are more variation even within the last batch in vaccinated groups than the non-immunized group. And if we compare between the blue one and the red one, the first and the last one, they are like, there are 3 times more genetic variation between the first and the last one in vaccinated groups than the non-immunized group. So you can interpret this like there are 0.34% genetic change across 6 animal passages or 6 batches, because we compare between the first one and the last one. But we have to interpret this with caution, because the viral loads in the samples from the vaccinated groups were lower according to this CT value plot. Both vaccinated groups had pretty high CT values. So the transmission here in this experiment just was ensured by inoculation, but may not have occurred in the real world settings. So this experiment just show you like how the virus evolve under like this kind of pressure we introduce, but doesn't show you the infectivity of the viruses. More than that, we also check like the protein mutations within the last batch. So the plot here show you like the number of protein mutations in each viral surface protein from GP2, GP3, 4, GP5, and M protein. So basically, there are more mutations at protein level in vaccinated group, the orange one and the purple one, than the green one, or the non-immunized group. And if we just look closer to the sites that were classified as the immunologic epitope or the positively selected sites, or the site that frequently mutated at protein level, or both, we found more mutations at those sites in vaccinated groups than the non-immunized group, like this. So for the key take-homes, the first one, we would claim that this is the very first experiment in the control setting. We have like the positive control group, the non-immunized one, showing the PRRS2 evolves under selection pressure, likely due to vaccination or immune pressure, and this may happen in the field. The second point is PRRS2 evolving in vaccinated pigs became more diversified and genetically distinct from the parent virus, with many changes occurring in immunologic regions of the genome, and this might be the cause of the new variant emergence nowadays, even we have a lot of like vaccination in the field. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Bill Wang from China, working in the Danish company based in China as a consulting company. Your trial was run in the wean-to-finish farm, and my question is, why not implement this trial in sow farm, as usually for the sow farm will have the vaccination for long term, and it will be more related.
So yeah, thank you for the question. At first, we didn't do this trial in like the farm setting. We just like use, this experiment in the farm. This is just like the experiment, the control experiment. We just like use the wean pig from like the naive farm, like the first naive farm, and just like separate them in the control setting, like all the way from weaning to like the end point. So this is not in the farm setting. And we, that's it.
We have a question back
there. Thank you. Mike, NC State. Fantastic work. Really love the genetic comparison and analysis there. What about on the immune side? Have you all looked at the serum to look for neutralizing antibodies? And if so, what are they targeting?
Actually, like that's the work from another, like our collaborator. So I cannot answer this, but like we did like measure like many things about immunology. Yeah, but it's not part of my work. Yeah.
Like you care about neutralizing antibodies? Bad joke.
So I asked the question.
So how do you know that it's actual mutation rather than selection from a mixed population, quasi-species that you have?
That's a very good question, because this is just our preliminary study. We also look at the quasi-species of these viruses. And we didn't show that here, but we found that like in the non-immunized group, we see a consistent like variation of quasi-species level population compared to like the vaccinated group. We found like a quick shift from batch 1 to the last batch. Yeah.
Good. Great. Thank you very much. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you.
You know this person coming up. So our last talk of this session will be by Alejandrina da Silva de Pita, who spent some time at Minnesota in a previous life. but she's going to be talking to us about monitoring the persistence of SVA in tonsils of sows during PRRS elimination protocols in a sow herd under herd closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Molitor. I'm honored to be here. And I just want to clarify that this study is a complementary study from a field project that we were performing under a condition of a company that it has a non-negotiable on keeping their farms as a negative status of PRRS. Since we didn't find any answers in the literature regarding Seneca, we wanted to perform this study as a complementary surveillance during an eradication protocol of PRRS in this farm. As we know, Seneca is an emerging viral pathogen that affects pigs, often causes vesicular lesions similar to foot and mouth diseases, and this leads us to a diagnostic misunderstanding, especially among those farms or companies that rely on international commercialization of pork. And it's important to know that outbreaks of this disease are self-limiting, and the virus can persist in the tonsils for more than 9 weeks. Antibodies can be detected by IFAs in serum for at least 13 months, and global outbreaks have been reported in America, Europe, and Asia. And in December 2021, Mexico reported its first official case in Mexico, and this led us to our local production on swine to understand what will happen in those farms that become positive in the country, and how to manage those farms, and how to interpret the positive status of those farms. The background of this farm is that it wasn't a small farm for the company. Our normal size are 6,000 sows, but this is one of the smallest one. It's an 1,800 sows, farrow to wean. It's located in Yucatan, Mexico, in the southeast of the country. And if you are not located up to this point where this farm is located, just please go to Cancun with your mind, and we are pretty close to Cancun, okay? So we confirmed the exposure of Seneca by AFA with no clinical signs in this farm, and it was a PRRS negative by week 41 of 2022. And the KPIs were outstanding, as you may see. The pre-weaning mortality was lower 2 digits. And in week 51, I don't know why, but close to Christmas, the farm had an outbreak of PRRS. And as a response on the department that I'm working with, we had to perform a program in order to eradicate PRRS by doing a live virus inoculation, and we stopped for 50 weeks the introduction of gilts. We also implemented biosecurity measures, and we also did complementary surveillance of PRRS and SVA. The objective of this study, I'm just gonna talk about Seneca. We wanted to monitor the persistence of Seneca in the tonsils of all the sows of this farm during the PRRS elimination protocol, and we wanted to know how long will persist the virus in the tonsils under natural circulation of the virus, and how long will it last, and if these 50 weeks of herd closure will be enough in order to eradicate the virus. So the project lasted 57 weeks, and the herd closure was lasted 50 weeks, and we decided to monitor all the death sows, or collect the tonsils from all death sows, and do real-time PCRs over those tissues, starting on week 20 after initiating the herd closure. Why we did that? Because we wanted to know And we let the clinical phase of PRRS to do its job, and we wanted to know after the clinical phase until the farm got up to baseline production if the Seneca virus was still present in the tonsils of those sows. Also, as part of the monitoring protocol, we included 6 sentinel animals that were naive to PRRS and to Seneca. After confirming the negative status, we also introduced 340 gilts because we needed to maintain the throughput of the production of the farm. And also, in 2 different moments, we collected serum samples in order to evaluate previous exposure of Seneca, starting on our monitoring period and ending in the monitoring period. So let's look at the results. By week 40, as I previously mentioned, the prevalence was 53%, so at least half of the population was exposed to the Seneca virus. Then 10 weeks earlier, the exposure was PRRS outbreak. So we let the farm 10 weeks to be prepared, loading, overstocking the gilts because we advised to the production team that we were going to close for 50 weeks the farm. So they had to load the inventory of the sows by introducing more gilts. And then we inoculated on week 8 of 2023 with live virus inoculation. We sequenced the virus, we quantify it, and we performed the inoculation with a control procedure that we have implemented in the company. And for this point, it's important to mention that that inoculum was negative to Seneca. During the herd closure, 83 sows were dead. So we collected 83 tonsils independently. We tried to avoid those cross-contamination, and we found that 8% of those tonsils were positive. Also, the serum samples at the beginning of this monitoring period, 47% of the samples were positive for IFA, meaning that we didn't see any significant difference between the proportion of sows since we early detected 40 weeks earlier, sorry. During the sentinelization period, we also keep collecting tonsil sows from all dead sows, but that period, it was a 10-week sentinelization period, 48 sows deaths were found dead or euthanized, and 2% of the tonsils got positive. And that made the conclusion that the viral was declining over the population. And also, after having those sentinels animals that were exposed to all the barns of the farm, the animals after 10 weeks didn't got any contamination. So we found that there was no any active virus in the herd. Once the farm reached negative status, we performed rectal swabs of the gilts, and we kept collecting tonsils from the dead sows. 31 were dead, and we didn't find any presence of the virus on those tonsils. We also, after 10 days after introducing those 340 gilts that I told you, we collected rectal swabs from those gilts, and they were all negative. And the serum samples show us that at least by that time, 73% of the sows were exposed to the virus. I'm not going to go over this graph as a detail, but I want to highlight that towards the end of the timeline, there was a significant reduction of the presence of the virus on the sample. And I invited you to my poster session in order to discuss these details. Detailing the PCR detections, 7% of the tonsils tested positive for SVA, and the average CT values were 32.83. And interestingly, 80% of those positive samples were detected during the first 16 weeks of the monitoring period. So 20 to 36 weeks after performing the hair closure. And the last detection of a positive sample or a suspect sample were in week 43 and in week 47 after the hair closure. In conclusion, this study appears to be effective for elimination of a naturally infected population of Seneca. And the implications for the farm managers are, for example, we need to highlight the comprehensive monitoring because this farm during the whole project didn't show any clinical signs such as are described in the literature. And we encourage the production system to do a regular evaluation of Seneca and the persistence on those farms that are without clinical signs. And also, we encourage the adoption of practical eradication strategies because this farm had a long hair closure and it was impacted by the sow inventory very hard, and it lost at least 10% of its normal production by doing this project and doing this. But it will be paid off after because we need to know that we have to control those viruses in a short and long term in order to avoid co-circulation of different pathogens in this, because we want to be these farms healthier and we want to manage the risk as an insurance and not as a reactive veterinarians in the field. So with this, I would like to thank you, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Questions? Dr. Torreson.
Nice job, interesting project.
Thank you.
At any point, did you use oral fluids for PRRS monitoring? And if so, did you also check it for SVA?
We were doing just processing fluids in order to to do the surveillance of PRRS. And no, we did some surveillance in the animals that we were weaning, but in different ages towards the end of the marketing, because we wanted them to be not circulating any virus or having some lesions at the time of marketing. But we didn't do.
Okay, thank you. Let's give her a hand.